Most people never notice the moment hatred quietly replaces affection. It rarely begins with an insult, or a betrayal, or even distance. It begins with something far more subtle, a change in energy. Have you ever noticed how some people suddenly become colder without ever giving you a reason? They still smile, they still talk to you politely, they still pretend everything is normal, but something feels different. The strange thing about people is that hatred is rarely expressed honestly, especially when envy, resentment, or insecurity are involved. Because open hatred is risky, secret hatred is safer. And with time, you begin to notice that the people who secretly dislike you often reveal themselves in very small ways, long before they ever admit it.
I am the Watcher, and here, in Shadow Insight, we observe the hidden mechanisms behind human behavior. In this episode, you'll discover the subtle signs that reveal when someone secretly hates you, even while pretending to support you. And the final sign is the one most people completely misunderstand, because it exposes a truth about human nature that almost nobody wants to accept. If you've ever felt that someone's behavior towards you changed without explanation, watch carefully, because once you see these patterns, you start noticing them everywhere. At first, nothing obvious happens. That is what makes secret hatred so difficult to detect. People imagine hatred as something loud, aggressive, visible. But in reality, the strongest resentment often hides behind politeness. Have you ever wondered why some people become strangely passive around you the moment things start going well in your life? They stop reacting naturally. Your success suddenly feels uncomfortable to them. Not enough to openly attack you, but enough to subtly change their behavior. Watch carefully. One of the first signs is the disappearance of genuine enthusiasm. You share good news, and their reaction feels delayed, forced, almost mechanical. They say the right words. That's great. Good for you. I'm happy for you. But something feels empty behind the sentence. Human nature always reveals itself eventually through emotional inconsistency, because real emotions are difficult to fake for long periods of time. Another sign appears in small acts of disrespect, disguised as humor. They make subtle jokes about you, tiny humiliations hidden behind sarcasm. And if you react, they immediately retreat behind, "Relax, I was joking. You're too sensitive." But the strange thing about passive hostility is that it often hides inside plausible deniability. The attack is small enough to deny, but repeated enough to slowly damage your confidence. Then there is the shift in attention. People who secretly resent you often stop truly listening to you. Not openly, not dramatically, but you begin to notice. They interrupt more, forget what matters to you, minimize your experiences, change the subject when you speak about something important. It is subtle, but psychologically, attention is respect. And when respect disappears, attention disappears first. Sometimes the hatred becomes visible through comparison. They constantly mention other people who are better, smarter, or more successful, not directly attacking you, just slowly positioning you beneath others, as if they need to reduce your value to feel emotionally balanced again. Have you ever noticed how some people become strangely critical only after you improve your life? When you were insecure, they felt comfortable. When you lacked confidence, they felt safe. But the moment you evolve, their behavior changes. Because some people never loved who you were becoming. They only loved the version of you that made them feel superior. Most people think hatred comes from anger, but very often it comes from comparison. That is the part people rarely admit, because comparison silently transforms admiration into resentment. Have you ever wondered why some people support you at the beginning, then slowly become colder as you grow? At first, your potential inspires them, but once your growth becomes real, it forces them to confront themselves, their failures, their fears, their inaction. And human beings are uncomfortable mirrors for one another. Jung believed that people often reject in others the very things they secretly struggle with inside themselves. This is why someone can dislike you for qualities that are objectively positive: your discipline, your confidence, your independence, your emotional stability. Not because these qualities are bad, but because they expose what the other person feels incapable of becoming. The strange thing about human nature is that people rarely say,
I resent you because your existence reminds me of my own limitations. Instead, the mind creates other justifications. You've changed. You think you're better now. You're different. But often, you did not become arrogant. You simply stopped shrinking yourself. And for insecure people, your evolution feels like rejection. Adler once observed that feelings of inferiority shape far more human behavior than most people realize. Some people spend their lives trying to escape the silent feeling of being less than. And when someone near them begins to rise, that buried insecurity awakens. This is why secret hatred is often mixed with fascination. Watch carefully. People who secretly dislike you sometimes observe you the most. They monitor your choices, your relationships, your progress. Not because they admire you purely, but because emotionally, they are measuring themselves against you constantly. That comparison slowly becomes exhausting. Then bitterness appears, and bitterness almost always hides behind subtle emotional behaviors: coldness, passive criticism, fake concern, emotional distance, or silent competition. Freud believed that many human reactions are driven by unconscious emotional conflicts people barely understand themselves. And this is why some individuals genuinely believe they are being honest with you, while unconsciously acting from envy or resentment. Because people are rarely fully aware of their own motivations, especially when pride is involved. The uncomfortable truth is this: many relationships survive only as long as the balance of status remains stable. The moment that balance changes, hidden emotions begin to surface. The most dangerous people are not always the ones who openly dislike you. At least honesty is clear. The real danger often comes from people who remain close, while quietly hoping for your decline. Because hidden hatred does not always seek confrontation. Sometimes it seeks control. Have you ever noticed how certain people subtly discourage you every time you try to improve your life? Not aggressively, just enough to create doubt. You sure that's a good idea? That probably won't work. You're aiming too high. Be realistic. At first, it sounds like concern. But with time, you begin to notice a pattern. They never truly want you to move beyond the version of yourself they became comfortable controlling. Human nature always reveals itself through reactions to power shifts. And success changes power dynamics. The moment you become more confident, more respected, more independent, some people begin to lose emotional access to you. That loss creates silent resentment. Nietzsche once observed that resentment often grows inside people who feel powerless to become what they admire. Instead of evolving themselves, they psychologically attack what reminds them of their inadequacy. But here is where things become darker. Secret hatred rarely appears through direct destruction. It usually appears through subtle erosion. They drain your motivation, question your decisions, withhold support, disappear during important moments, minimize your achievements, celebrate your failures quietly. And the strange thing is, they often remain physically close to you, while emotionally working against you. Because proximity gives access to your doubts, your weaknesses, your emotions. Watch carefully. Some people do not want to destroy you completely. They simply want to keep you small enough so they can still feel superior. This is why hidden hatred often intensifies when you stop needing validation. The moment you become emotionally independent, certain people lose their psychological influence over you. And that loss of influence feels threatening to them. Have you ever wondered why some relationships suddenly become tense the moment you develop self-respect? Because self-respect changes the balance. You tolerate less. You seek less approval. You become harder to manipulate emotionally.
And people who benefited from your insecurity often experience your growth as betrayal. That is the truth most people avoid. Not everyone around you wants to see you become powerful. Some people only support the version of you they can emotionally dominate. But here is the part most people are not ready to hear. Sometimes you have also felt this emotion. Not extreme hatred, but subtle resentment. A quiet discomfort when someone else succeeded. A hidden comparison. A moment of bitterness you immediately tried to suppress. Because the truth is, human beings constantly measure themselves against one another. Have you ever noticed how difficult it is to remain completely unaffected by the success of someone close to you? Especially when their progress highlights something unresolved inside yourself. That discomfort does not automatically make someone evil. It makes them human. The real question is what people choose to do with that emotion. Some people use comparison as motivation. Others let it slowly become hostility. And with time, unresolved insecurity begins to distort perception itself. You stop seeing the person clearly. Instead, you see what they represent emotionally. Their confidence feels arrogant. Their happiness feels performative. Their success feels unfair. Not because it truly is, but because pain changes interpretation. The strange thing about people is that many secretly crave authenticity, while simultaneously resenting those who live freely. Because freedom exposes fear. Someone who speaks confidently exposes your silence. Someone who takes risks exposes your hesitation. Someone who evolves exposes where you remain stuck. And this is why hidden hatred often says more about the observer than the target. Watch carefully. The people who constantly criticize others are often revealing the internal war they cannot resolve within themselves. But this reflection must also turn inward, because if you never examine your own resentment, it quietly grows in the shadows. You begin minimizing others, judging them unfairly, searching for flaws to emotionally protect your ego, and eventually, you become exactly the type of person you once feared. This is why self-awareness matters, not to become perfect, but to remain conscious of the darker mechanisms constantly moving beneath human behavior. Because hatred rarely begins as hatred. It often begins as wounded pride left unexamined. Most people believe secret hatred is easy to recognize, but real resentment rarely announces itself openly. It hides behind politeness, behind sarcasm, behind fake concern, behind emotional distance that slowly grows over time. And the deeper truth is this: people do not always resent you because you harmed them. Sometimes they resent you because your existence forces them to confront themselves, their insecurities, their fears, their lack of action, the version of themselves they abandoned long ago. That was the hidden mechanism from the beginning. The final sign was never simply their behavior toward you. It was the emotional discomfort your growth created inside them, because human nature reacts strongly to mirrors. And the moment you stop shrinking yourself to protect other people's comfort, you begin discovering who truly supported you and who only preferred your weakness. But this episode is not only about others, it is also about awareness, because the same darkness exists in almost everyone. The difference is whether you recognize it or allow it to control you unconsciously. I am the watcher. And here, in Shadow Insight, we observe the hidden truths people rarely admit out loud. If this episode made you recognize certain behaviors around you or within yourself, leave a comment below. And subscribe if you want to continue exploring the invisible psychology behind human behavior. Because sometimes, the people smiling at you the most are the ones quietly hoping you never realize your true value. But then, what happens the moment you stop needing anyone's approval at all?